My name is Alex Williams. I'm representing Microsoft here, Microsoft Consulting part of the business. So I'm responsible for Europe, Middle East, and Africa region, and working with public sector customers. So here, what I wanted to do in this short, limited time that we have here is just to go over some of the main things I have noticed in different countries of what they are doing with open data, some of the main challenges with the open data. Again, some of them, it could be that you've already solved, some of them maybe not. So that's the first piece, is kind of the open data piece. Nature of open data, some challenges, and some examples. And then the second piece, which is kind of related, but on the other hand, a separate one, cover a little bit big data topic. It is something more newer, I would say, and therefore I will just show a little bit of the kind of nature of big data and some of the examples of where we see it used, which are the primary industries or areas, sub-areas of public sector that are targeting big data. So with that, let's go in and deep dive into the open data piece. Again, I will not cover what open data is. Everybody knows that, right? So I will not go into the details. What I want to do is I want to go into the details of some of these specific attributes, the principles of open data. I want to investigate a little bit with you, what are the typical challenges of implementing these attributes, right? Because we know what open data should be. The question is, do we implement it as it should be, right? So I'll look at broadly accessible or not. I'll look at usable by humans and machines, or maybe not. And also we'll look at usability and the barriers, also legal ones. Again, sharing only some of the main things because our time is limited. If you have more questions, I'm happy to answer later on as well during the discussion. So, usable by humans and machines. One thing that we see very often in open data projects across various regions is that they are, of course, starting slowly, based on what the people, what the government organizations already had. Therefore, the use cases are not targeting all the, let's say, all the user groups that we would have. Normally, what you would have as user groups for open data are these three main ones. Of course, there are some kind of subtle differences and maybe some additional ones, but mainly, of course, citizens, researchers, or I mentioned journalists, kind of investigative people, and then also the ISVs or independent developers that build on top of this open data platform, right? So if we look for the citizens, what would be the natural thing that citizens would have? They don't want to use CSV files, they don't want to use Excel files, right? They want to use actually not the open data, they want to use a derivative of that open data, which is actually mobile apps typically, given the current new wave, let's say, or current trends of going into mobility. Everybody has a smartphone, right? So this for the citizens. For the researchers, normally what they would want to do, like researchers who are doing some statistics for their research, of course there could be some advanced tools, but many of them might want to use just simple, common tools that they have used for data analysis, comparing different data sets, working with them. And then the last group of people, the ISVs and developers, of course, they need standardized API, right? And let's look at how things are happening in some countries. So very often, and here I will be using an example from Moscow. Yesterday I was in Moscow doing some workshops, so therefore I chose to use the Moscow example. By the way, the cities are the ones that are actually embracing the open data and big data solutions more. Probably the reason is because the use of the open data in the city environment is much more right away, right? The traffic information can be used right away, and all the other information like public Wi-Fi spots, things like that, so it can be used right away. So just to use this as an example, typically the people start only with the basic set of information, like a catalog of things, exposing data like CSV, as you can see there, just the table data, that's it, browsing. Who is the user of this type of data? Right? The users of this type of data actually are only researchers. The citizens would not use it because it's too hard to use. So would ISVs use the data? Maybe they can use them for building their applications, but the problem is that if the data is just available as CSV file, it's a lot of hassle, a lot of problems to use the data, right? So it's not really something that they would want to use. So this is really only a start, I would say. We need to go to the next level. And I looked at the Slovak implementation. It seems that actually you are, for some of the data sets, you are going to this next level as part of the previously mentioned platform. So the next level is effectively going into a standardized protocol and exposing the data for the developers in a much better way, right? Standardized protocols, also using the flexible approach for querying the data, and also making sure that it works on mobile. To work on mobile, it needs to be basic protocols like HTTP, JSON, things like that. Again, maybe the colleagues might correct me, but the thing I looked at in the Slovak implementation, you are not the API is very rich. But I'm not sure, I didn't see kind of a lot of flexibility in things like querying the data sets. You might correct me. Is it possible to filter out things or not? Because this we see as a next step that is really needed when implementing these things. With time, data sets will become bigger, right? We will want to publish more and more information. Data sets will not be just small ones that can be downloaded in one go. So normally, especially if we want to enable the use of the data on mobile phones and mobile applications, the search capability in the dataset through API is really important, right? So this is maybe one additional thing to consider when considering the updates and development of your application platform for open data. The good thing is that if we go for an open standard that is, for example, OData, that is again based on JSON and HTTP, we automatically enable standard tools to be used by researchers and journalists and just the people who are interested in playing around with the data. What OData supports is that it automatically integrates, for example, in Excel. Right, so everybody who has an Excel reasonably recent version, they can automatically point to a website using the URL, get the data into the Excel, get another data set in, and actually start merging the data sets together, doing some interesting analysis and graphics, for example, on top of that. So these are good things to, a good approach, let's say, to make sure that we are targeting well these two groups as well. And then the last piece that I wanted to add here is once we have these two primary pieces in place, of course we are enabling the ISVs to develop applications, and then and in this case it's very important to have the community around this data. In case of the Moscow, what they have is actually they have more than 25 applications, mobile applications developed that are targeting this data platform and data APIs. Things like just information on various things in Moscow. So a lot of additional elements that you might imagine. The interesting thing is that it's not a government-sponsored initiative anymore, right? So here I think we see also possibility to change the business model a little bit. A government does not have to invest in building Android app, building Windows Phone app, building an iOS app. The government stops at publishing the API, and what happens later is that actually various enthusiasts or ISVs are actually seeking an opportunity to build on top of it, to monetize maybe on an app, right? So this is also a good thing what these platforms enable. Second piece, free of any technology. What I see often when countries start to do open data projects, if you look at the individual organization, let's assume that this is a solution that the individual government organization has. What they do is that as a next step, they are opening up, the data sets, and they need to create a lot of additional stuff to expose them in a nice way. What does it mean? It means that actually it slows down the process. Publishing this information is much slower because they need to work on maybe transforming the data structures. They need to implement some additional caching, some additional web servers because there's more load potentially coming in with time, right? So it is, again, a big project and it takes time. Ideally, we want to remove this complexity. And the way we can do it is actually by the use of centralized solution. I think, again, you have the good first steps already by data portal you have. But I would argue that another option how to speed this up is actually to use for some of these components public cloud platforms that actually enable at application level to do some of these transformations of data, the caching of information in a much easier way. Here you can see the example of the process map from one of the big UK cities with whom we are working. So Microsoft Consulting is working to help them implement a kind of next generation platform that will support both the open data and big data scenarios as well. That's how we would suggest to solve the second problem. The third observation in open data space is free of any legal barriers, right? And this is probably one of the problems that is not solvable easily on technology level, and where the problem lies. In many countries, the government is structured in such a way, in my experience, where if we have the typical government organization that has the government employees and their systems that they use, and of course the systems have the interesting data for everybody, what happens is that very often these government organizations actually issue some notes to the citizens, and they get the money for that note, right? And very often, unfortunately, or again fortunately, the budgets of these government organizations are skewed in such a way that their funding is based on issuing these notes. And this is one of the potential big political challenge of opening the data, because they kind of want to open the data, but the problem is that once they open the data and somebody else starts to publish this information directly through API, people can verify it directly through API. It means that actually they will not get that money coming in anymore, or at least this money will diminish, right? So there needs to be a political will to make sure that we change the financing model for such organizations to enable them to publish data out. And again, we can discuss maybe specific examples later on. So these were kind of three specific observations on open data that I have, and I think what we need to take into account in implementing such solutions. If we look at the big data space, I think one thing to consider is that actually everybody's talking about big data, but I think it's actually not the real thing, right? It's not the big data, it's actually the big questions and the big insights that we want to get out of the big data. And this is the complexity of the big data topic. If open data is kind of simple, we already have the data, we just need to publish it out and make sure it's available for everybody, then the big data is much more complex, because sometimes we don't even know which data might be interesting to build up some interesting big data questions, to get these interesting big data insights, right? And we are, here in this topic, we are going into a discussion of having data scientists that actually can help in working in this area, targeting specific things. So, just to quickly cover, of course, the business potential estimated also by EU, and this includes not only public sector but also commercial. This is a humongous one, right? We need to understand how we can tackle the big data problems and problem space as well. Now, first guys, of course, who are tackling this are commercial guys. What they are doing is, for example, this is an example from UK, an insurance agent in UK. What they did is that they enabled an application on the mobile device of the drivers. If you run this mobile application on your device until when you drive, then we analyze how you drive, and effectively based on that we can offer benefits for you as a good driver, actually lowering some of the costs, as you can see, by 20%. Of the insurance, right? So this is one thing that started in commercial. What we see in public sector, this is we see big data things starting up in areas where we have a lot of, let's say, devices and sensors, right? Things like transportation, things like social network analysis, energy consumption optimization. So these are the main areas. Of course, also public safety and awareness. So just to give you a couple of examples, and again we can discuss things further on later. One thing from of course, big data country, China, right? One of the big problems they are having is air quality in the cities. And so what we're having is actually a solution for them which does a predictive analysis based on all the sensors in the city of how the air quality will change. And they even had fun and created an application which can route you through the cleanest route in the city based on the predictive analysis of where you have the cleanest thing, right? So this is just one example. And as you can see, these are crazy things. It's not more like open data things where we publish the traditional elements. And the second example is the situational awareness that I mentioned. So this is more traditional example where, again, using big data, we can get additional situational insights into the solutions. So effectively, in conclusion, jumping around here a bit, open data is here to stay, and definitely it has a lot of benefits. And there are some best practices that we need to follow to implement it. Big data is something to watch out because actually it has a humongous benefit coming from it. So this space needs to be watched out. And from Microsoft perspective, of course, we have the platforms to support any of these aspirations. Thanks a lot, and I'm happy to answer the questions later on.